A webinar session with Chief Operating Officer Dr. Mafu Rakometsi of Umalusi Quality Council for General and Further Education and Training is taking place. It talks to how it will be conducting quality assurance of assessment under COVID-19 and its implications on the 2020 national examinations and the cohort of learners. We cross now to that.
2009. I will now hand over to Dr. Rakometsi to give us the presentation. I hope he managed to join us. CEO, are you here with us? CEO?
Thank you, Lucky. Thank you, everybody. You're welcome to the Umalusi webinar. Lucky, can I come on?
Yes, if you may. Hello.
No, thank you very much. I was at the point where I wanted to welcome everybody to this webinar. And I want also, Lucky. Hello, Lucky, can you hear me?
CEO, I think
Lucky, can you hear me?
You are not. I can hear you, but you are not audible enough. Yeah, I can barely hear you.
You have to organize the IT.
You are not audible, CEO.
We've got a problem of Wi-Fi. Like I'm ready. That is if you are able to hear me clearly.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I think it's better now. You can go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues, and thanks for joining us at this Umalusi webinar. We are going to be talking about the quality assurance of the 2020 National Senior Certificate Examinations. And I believe the presentation is being displayed on your devices as we go on. I'm going to take you through a presentation, and the presentation is going to focus on the following. The slides would not move here. Let me see, yeah. The presentation outline is as follows. First of all, we're going to look at the Umalusi's mandate and regulatory framework. That will be the legislative framework that informs the work of the organization. I'm going to be looking at the framework for quality assurance of assessment, quality assurance processes. And these quality assurance processes include the following: the moderation of question papers, the monitoring and moderation of school-based assessment, monitoring of the state of readiness to conduct examinations, the monitoring of the writing and marking of these examinations, the auditing of appointed markers, and the marking guideline discussions, verification of marking, and we're going to also look at standardization and resulting. It will be very important that we spend some time on the class of 2020, and we'll then be able to conclude. First of all, Umalusi's mandate and regulatory framework. First of all, it is very important for us to note that we operate as a quality council. We are a QC, and we derive our mandate from an Act of Parliament, the National Qualifications Framework Act number 67 of 2008. Section 27H of the NQF Act says the QC must develop and implement policy and criteria for assessment for the qualifications on this framework. Section 27H, when it refers to the QC, it refers to Umalusi in this instance. It allows us to develop and implement policy and criteria for assessment of the qualifications that are on the Umalusi sub-framework of qualifications. 27I says the QC must, with regards to quality assurance within its sub-framework, do the following: develop and implement policy for quality assurance, ensure the integrity and credibility of quality assurance, ensure that quality assurance, as is necessary for the sub-framework, is undertaken. Very important mandates that we get from that piece of legislation. The other Act of Parliament that drives our mandate is the General and Further Education and Training Quality Assurance Act, acronym GENFETQA Act. Section 17A of the GENFETQA Act says, can you control the noise, Lucky? Can we ask everybody to mute, please?
Colleagues, can we please mute the sound? Please, let's all mute our sound.
So you're not hearing us.
Okay, can we proceed?
I can see people that have joined.
I see several people have not muted their sound. Can we all mute our sound, please? Please, let's mute the sound.
No, it's later. I
Can the following people please try to mute the sound? I see here Nomhamba, Samani, Princess, Sibusiso, Tebo Kabai. Please, all of us, let's just mute the sound, colleagues.
I can hear him, but
thank you.
He's gone again.
No, I think
Theo, you may go on.
Thank you very much, Lucky. Thank you, colleagues. I was about to talk about the clauses of the General and Further Education and Training Quality Assurance Act. That our founding act is the GENFETQA Act, and it says the council must perform the external moderation of assessment of all assessment bodies and educational institutions. We've got a number of assessment bodies. We've got the Department of Basic Education, the Department of Higher Education and Training, the Independent Examinations Board, the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, Benchmark Assessment Agency. Some are public, some are private. The GENFETQA Act also says council may adjust raw marks during the standardization process. Now, going further on the clauses of the GENFETQA Act, it says the council must, with the concurrence of the Director General, and after consultation with the relevant assessment body or education institution, approve the publication of the results of learners. If council is satisfied that the assessment body or education institution has conducted the assessment free from any irregularity that may jeopardize the integrity of the assessment or its outcomes. That is the first condition that allows us to release the results. Also, we are allowed to release the results if you are satisfied that the assessment body has complied with the requirement prescribed by council for conducting assessments. Also, if they have applied the standards prescribed by council, which a learner is required to comply with in order to obtain a certificate, or complied with every other condition determined by council. Very important. Now, looking at the framework for quality assurance of assessment. Quality assurance of assessment is conducted to ensure that assessment leading to the award of a certificate in schools, adult education centers, technical and vocational education and training colleges is of the required standard. This is in order to ensure that the certificates issued by Umalusi are credible. We do quality assurance of assessment in order to ensure that the certificates that we give to the learners are credible. We achieve this through the moderation of the examination question papers, the moderation of practical assessment tasks, the PETs, and common assessment tasks in the case of life orientation, the monitoring and moderation of school-based assessment, the monitoring of the conduct, administration, and management of assessment and examination processes, the monitoring and moderation of marking, very important, the management of concessions and examinations irregularities. And we also do the standardization of assessment outcomes. Those are the processes that we follow to ensure that the certificates that we issue to the candidates are of the required standard. Those steps that I've mentioned. I'm going to get deeper into each of those steps. Question paper moderation. One may ask, why do we moderate question papers? What is the rationale for the moderation of question papers? Umalusi conducts the external moderation of question papers set by the different assessment bodies in order to ensure that the question papers and their marking guidelines are of the required standard, and that they compare fairly well with those approved for the previous examinations. You'll note that we do external moderation of question papers set by the different assessment bodies. It could be Department of Basic Education, Department of Higher Education and Training, IEB, Sakai, benchmark assessment agencies. And we have to ensure consistency of standards from one year to the other, so that you don't have fluctuations of standards from one year to the other with regards to, for instance, grade 12 examinations. The approach for 2020 will be that all question papers to be used will cover the full scope of the curriculum as prescribed. And these papers were approved in 2019 already for the end of this year. Accounting and business studies question papers, however, will consist of 2 question papers each for the first time in 2020. And they've also been set and moderated and approved. So the only difference with regards to the question papers this year will be with accounting and business studies, which for the first time will each have 2 papers. The moderation of school-based assessment. You'll notice that school-based assessment happens at schools, different schools throughout the country. Now, why do we want to moderate school-based assessment? We do this in order to assess consistency of marking standards across administered tasks in a subject within the school and across schools in a district, in a region, or in a provincial education department, in order to ensure fairness for individual learners and schools. For the National Senior Certificate, school-based assessment constitutes 25% of the mark, and that is a huge percentage. We have to ensure that that percentage that the learners get out of school-based assessment is fair, and that it compares favorably with what learners in other schools marked by different teachers. It is fair and consistent with what a learner in another school would obtain. To assess skills that cannot be assessed in the examination. So school-based assessment does not happen in the setting of an examination. So we test skills that cannot be assessed in the examination with school-based assessment. This year, we intend to adopt a diverse modalities for moderation and verification of SBA, orals, and the PETs, practical assessment tasks. We want to adopt diverse modalities. The modality could be on-site moderation at a school, off-site moderation of sample portfolios from sample schools, shared drives of learner and teacher evidence, which comprise digital images of learner evidence of assessment, electronic evidence of assessment tasks, moderation and feedback of the internal moderation. So we'll be engaging in all those modalities to ensure that there is consistency in the assessment of school-based assessment. Moderation of school-based assessment, oral and practical assessment tasks. The approach for 2020 will be where on-site moderation is conducted, the following should be in place. Moderation will be conducted in smaller groups, observing COVID-19 protocols and occupational health and safety protocols and social distancing to ensure safety of moderators, learners, educators at schools that are going to be visited. We are going to ensure that there is a reduced number of learners in moderation of practical examinations and safety around sanitation of workplaces. That is key, in particular this year, because we are dealing with the pandemic. We have to ensure that the system is ready to run the examinations of 2020. We undertake state of readiness to gauge the assessment body's level of preparedness to conduct, administer, and manage credible national examinations prior to the commencement of such examinations. Before we start with this examination, we have to ensure that the system is ready to run the examinations and that they meet certain prerequisites that are required for them to be ready for the running of the examinations. The approach for 2020 will be that we have an adapted risk management approach, which is going to be applied, where audits will be carried out in the main remotely because of the restrictions that have been imposed by the pandemic. Each of the 9 provincial education departments will be required to submit valid evidence for each of the predetermined key indicators that address the appropriate state of readiness focus areas. Very important. Evidence required is to be submitted on the dates determined by Umalusi. Verification site visits will be conducted when necessary. When necessary, after doing a desktop evaluation, we will decide to go physically to the site concerned. We need to monitor the writing and marking of examinations. And the reasons why we do that is that we carry an oversight role in the monitoring of examinations and marking to ensure that examinations are conducted in accordance with the available policies and regulations in order to ensure that the credibility and integrity of the examinations is maintained, as well as valid and reliable before the release of the results. Now, I want to share with you again the approach that will be taken for 2020. We're going to follow a differentiated approach for monitoring of writing and marking. This will entail remote monitoring through real-time digital means and deployment of contracted monitors. On-site monitoring at sample centers will be conducted under strict COVID-19 protocols enforced by Umalusi as a quality assurance body. We are going to do the audit of appointed markers. We do this in order to ensure that suitable and qualified marking personnel with the requisite skills and experience are appointed in correct positions before the commencement of the marking of the national senior certificate examinations. We want people who mark the scripts of our learners to be qualified and experienced. We would not want people with no experience to touch the scripts of our learners. The approach that we're going to assume this year is a desktop evaluation of records, evidence against the criteria for appointment of markers as prescribed. We are going to use databases, spreadsheets, records of all the appointed markers from the provincial education departments And we're going to compare those records with the Umalusi database of the markers that were appointed in the previous years. Moderators, verifiers, staff members will identify risks or anything that is in contravention of policy. And where necessary, physical verification will be conducted. Very important, very important. We are going to conduct also marking guideline discussions. Marking guideline discussions. This is intended to ensure accuracy and consistency in the marking process across subjects, across marking centers, and across provinces by approving the final marking guideline and determining appropriate tolerance ranges for the marking of scripts. Very important. This is intended to ensure uniform understanding and application of the marking guideline across the 9 provinces. Because each province is marking its own scripts, we have to ensure consistency of marking across the different provinces, across the different subjects, and across the different marking centers all over the country. The approach for 2020 will be, we are going to, as Umalusi, participate in all marking guideline discussion meetings, and a mixed mode will be adopted. The intention is to gradually move away from face-to-face contact to integrated technology. Be that as it may, Umalusi still needs to ensure the reliability of the 2020 marking process and maintain quality and standards in the NSC National Senior Certificate Assessment. Verification of marking. We verify marking to determine whether the approved marking guidelines were adhered to, that the marking guidelines that were approved are adhered to and applied consistently across subjects and marking centers. We want to confirm with the process that marking was fair, that marking was valid, and marking was reliable. Those are very key that we ensure that they happen. Now, this year, our approach is going to be that external moderators will be deployed to marking centers identified by assessment bodies across the country. Moderators will spend approximately 3 days per question paper in a marking center. Umalusi will at all times ensure adherence to the COVID-19 pandemic protocols and regulations, including travel protocols. Essentially, friends, verification of marking will follow the conventional approach with minor modifications due to COVID-19 pandemic protocols and regulations. You'd understand that there's to be physical contact with the scripts for us to verify marking. There can be no other way that we follow other than that, because we have to check whether the marker who marked the scripts actually did justice to the paper and whether that marker adhered to the approved marking guideline. That is critical. We standardize results. The standardization of results and verification of resulting is one of the key steps that we follow in finalizing the results of learners. This is provided for in the founding act of Umalusi, the General and Further Education and Training Quality Assurance Act. The provision of the GenFEDQA Act says, council, they adjust raw marks. So it is not something that we coined ourselves. We have been mandated by Parliament to adjust raw marks where necessary. We need to emphasize that this is not a practice that is unique to South Africa. It is not a process that is unique to Umalusi. It is an international practice for large-scale assessment systems. Standardization process is used to mitigate the effect of factors other than the learner's knowledge and aptitude of the learners on the learner's performance. Now, there could be a number of sources of variability that may necessitate standardization. It could be the difficulty in the question paper. I'll just add an example that we use experts in setting the papers and in moderating the papers. However, they remain human. And human beings may think they've pitched the paper at the right level, only to find that they've either made the paper too easy or too difficult. Standardization will come in to look at whether the paper was difficult or too easy and do the necessary adjustments as mandated by the founding act of Umalusi. It could be as a result of undetected errors. You and I would know that an omission of a full stop, a comma, or a bracket in a mathematical problem can change the game in terms of the interpretation of the question, and therefore be an undetected error which may throw the learners off. That is very important. Where such happen, we use standardization to correct those undetected errors that went into the examination. Even the language experts will know that where you place a comma, a semicolon in a sentence can change the meaning of the sentence. Where such happen unintended, we have to correct those sources of variability through standardization. A learner interpretation of questions.